He had a wonderful capacity to inspire people, not only on the playing fields, but I think the record speaks for itself. 3 premiers, that's not a bad effort. And the loyalty which so many of these ex-students still show to him is wonderful, and the esteem in which they hold him. And it wasn't an overt type of leadership, it was just sort of plugging away, I think, trying to get the best out of people.
My first impressions, I believe, were as a kid in the playground and, you know, in school breaks, and Father Doneley coming around and talking to all of us. And I think I was in about my 3rd year at Chevalier at the time, and we were all just kids. And he made a point of coming around and talking to us, you know, during the breaks in class and so on. And he made the effort to get to know us all by name. And it was soon legendary around the school that he knew everybody. And then I noticed, one of the things I noticed was that all of our parents, especially those from Wollongong, like blokes like Johnny Walton and Michael Atwell and a few others, their parents got to know Father Doneley really well. And so it was one big happy family really when Father Doneley became the rector of Chevalier a very short time after he started.
My memories of Father Doneley seem to be focused on the fact that he was very even-handed with the students. I felt that he had no pets, he had no favourites. It's fair to say that he had a stronger relationship with some students than others, and a very comfortable relationship with those that he was coaching in the various sports, and I guess that was natural. But I don't believe anybody was a victim of not being given a fair opportunity. He saw potential in everyone, and he saw some really good points in every student there, and seemed always to focus on that and give every student the opportunity to develop those skills, those characteristics which they displayed.
And I think he had an indelible effect on the school. It grew in many ways under his care. It got bigger naturally. And I think the sporting and academic achievements of the school really increased significantly during his 5 years there, and laid a pretty good basis for extending the school.
And he took a keen interest in us, and I think he was the director of activities, you know, even though there was this close relationship between him and us. You know, he used to work us pretty hard, and he'd send us around the Heart of a morning in midwinter. We'd have to run around the Heart and after Mass and before breakfast, and so he'd keep us pretty fit. But he was there, and we appreciated the fact that he was there watching us, and he took a great interest in us.
But I can see it just through a lot of the fellows that I was at school with, just quietly influencing them, and then creating sort of wonderful opportunities for them that may not have arisen but for his influence.
Father Doneley was a quiet man to some degree. He was unassuming, and on reflection, very well respected by his students and also by his fellow priests and brothers. But he was what I would define as a quiet leader, but people absolutely took notice of him. I'll give you an example of what I mean, and it relates to a football match that was held on the Oval, and it was a fairly spirited match, and I might read what had happened. During the game, the school barrackers were so excited and passionate that they couldn't stay behind the rope on the sideline, and they were creeping onto the field. The referee told them to get back, but a mob rule had developed and no one moved. The touch judge said get back, but no one moved. The players said get back, but no one moved. And the prefect said get back, but no one moved. At some moment, someone noticed that Father Doneley, who always watched from the quarter line, had moved onto the field. Someone yelled, "Look out, there's Tice." We all looked towards the quarter line and saw Father Doneley standing 5 yards onto the field in his habit with his arms comfortably crossed. When everyone was looking at him, he smiled as if to say, "I can see you are all enjoying yourselves, but you will have to get off the field," and with his arms still in the cross position, he gave 2 simple flicks of his hand and the entire school retreated over the rope. When everyone was settled, the game continued. That's one of the ways that Tyson Doneley operated, quietly but firmly.
Well, look, I guess, you know, the memories frequently of our school days tend to focus on things that we enjoyed most, and in my case that included sport, and the fact that we had a champion sportsman. It's just no exaggeration. He was the most talented sportsman in both football and cricket. His capacity to kick goals, to drop kick goals, to pinpoint accurately, hit a line or a flag somewhere with a football was just almost legendary. And then when it came to bowling, he could bowl fast. He could bowl spinners, leg breaks, off breaks, you name it. And of course, once he got hold of the bat, then all of us used to scatter to the boundaries because he'd hit the ball very close to them or over, no matter how hard any of our best players would bowl to him.
I think he went to school at St Joseph's, and he was in the first cricket team and the first football team. And in the first 15, when the Joeys won the competition that year, apparently their hardest game was against Shaw, and he was up against this really huge 5'8" called Jaika Travers, who went on to play rugby for England and Australia. And Father Doneley told me that he never felt so sore and bruised after a game in all his life. But he won the day, and it's interesting that both those men, Travers and Father Doneley, went on to spend their whole lives in education.
Yeah, Father Doneley was looked upon a little bit with suspicion, as I've said before, as the new guy on the block, as the new coach, whether that be either rugby or whether it be cricket. And he pulled together the team on the oval, and he made it very clear very quickly of his prowess. I understand, and this has never been confirmed, but I understand he wasn't very far away from getting into the Queensland Sheffield Shield team as a cricketer. I do know that he played a lot of cricket up at Toowoomba in the district area, and was very well known for that. But it didn't take us very long to see that we had a good rugby coach, a good cricket coach, and over time we could see we had a great bloke there as the rector of Chevalier.
The rugby teams were good. We had a number of boys from New Guinea who did very well. John Dewan and Cora and Albert Boga, two from Port Moresby. John became later on Sir John Dewan and Cora, Minister of Sport from Papua New Guinea. He was a very good centre, and Albert was a very good forward. But our own local boys were probably better.
Soon sport came to the fore with Father Doneley, and I became very heavily involved from that point of view. I was deeply involved in the cricket and in the rugby. And what used to happen as time went on was that we'd go down to train in the rugby, and I didn't mind this at all. He'd get the captain and the vice captain of the team to get the backs and the forwards to go and do their training, and he and I'd kick for goals. And he was just unerring in his accuracy as far as goal kicking was concerned, and as far as drop kicking was concerned. And also you realise too, he wasn't a big man at all. But also with his cricket, He was just a powerful batsman, a very beguiling type of spinner, and for a small framed man, you might notice he has big hands, and very strong hands. And I think that had a lot to do with his cricket. But you learnt very quickly how good he was when you trained with him and you were doing your best to get him and get him out. And I can remember Ted O'Brien. Poor Ted was out on the field as we did spread when Father Doneley batted. Ted wanted to catch that ball that was going over the fence at the Oval. He caught it. It split the webbing in his hands and he went straight to the ambulance. But Tyson Doneley was pretty dangerous with a bat.
I vividly recall the fact that he thought I had some ability to captain the first 11 and gave me that privilege, and then taught me how to set fields. When our opponents were bowling and I wasn't at the crease, I would sit in the college hold-in with Father Doneley and he'd point out to me where the field should be set for different types of bowlers. And he made it very clear to me that you just simply didn't set a standard type field for fast bowlers and for slow or spin bowlers, but you adapted as and when the type of bowler was bowling in a certain manner to ensure that you either cut off runs or gave yourself the best chance of a catch.
I think sport's very important for a boarding school particularly, because you have to occupy the boarders, and when they do well at sport, it gives them enthusiasm, and gives them a lift in spirit that they don't get otherwise.
And I think one of the other things that would be great from a competitive point of view, as Evan Whitten said that Father Tyson imbued into all his protégés when he was coaching them, to win as if you're used to it and to lose as if you liked it. And I think they'd be great values to have.
We said we had a new building, and that gave scope for growth, and the growth did take place in those years. Considerable growth in numbers, mainly of boarders, and with those numbers we were able to perform better in various fields. We had another interesting priest there on the south, Father Brian Strangman, and he originated tours in various parts of Australia, and they went very well as an initiative from him. They went through the Northern Territory and through Tasmania and South Australia and various places like that, and they were good outlets for the kids.
There were a number of Chevalier students that came from, if you want to call it the Illawarra area, Wollongong. Certainly quite a number that came from Maruya, Bruce McDiarmid, Milets, Turnbulls, Brogans, etc., from down that way. So there was a good span from the coast that came up to Bowral. And certainly it was different living up there, climate-wise, at Bowral compared to where we lived. But for me, going to boarding school, going to Chevalier in particular, was a great help for me. I was starting to mix with the wrong people, and the decision quite rightly was made by Mum and Dad to send me to Chev. I didn't think it was the right decision. I've got to say, as I kind of stood there at the time, looked at the car driving out in 1956, and I didn't feel good about it at all. And I have to say that I was homesick for the first 18 months. On the reverse, when I left, I'd gotten to the stage of liking the place so much, having a mentor like Tyson Doneley, having a network of friends and people that I was just enjoying life there, and I wouldn't have minded staying there for another year or so. So I was a changed person over the time, and from a point of view of character building and all sorts of pluses, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Well, one of the things I thought was he did well, Father Doneley, was in the running of the school. I was one of the prefects, and of a Sunday night, or I think it was Sunday night, he'd normally get us in for a cup of tea in the front room of the parlour in the old cottage at the school, and we'd have this prefects meeting, you might call it, where we'd discuss the events of last week and the events of next week. And it was just an informal meeting where we just talk over our cups of tea and we'd talk about things. And I thought that was one of the smart things that he really did to help in the running of the school and the interaction between the teachers and the prefects and the students. And the school generally ran pretty smoothly, I think, because of the fact that there was a great interaction between the staff and the students. And one example of that was, this is another thing Father Doneley did, I believe, put a prefect or a final year student on one of the refectory tables. And so there'd be one or two older boys on the tables with the younger boys, and so that they'd get to talk to the younger kids, and the kids would be happier and get to know the older kids. And that was used to be rotated a bit. And so I thought that was a smart thing to do and helped the school get along smoothly.
You were talking about the boys of Chalet when I came there.
Yeah.
I thought that they turned into the salt of the earth. They're like the top class boys that we produce in our other colleges. I think there's an MSc stamp that affects them and helps them to result in really being top class people.
Well, I'm sure Father Doneley helped me get some self-confidence and to back myself a little bit. Because I think a lot of students who were at the school at the time, I think he spent time with a lot of us, and I think that helped us because he was so good at things. It helped us to aspire to be good at things, and I think he was a great help to myself and John Fay's, John Fay, the things that he's done later in life. But there's lots and lots of kids, and that I think he helped a lot with their lives.
I think irrespective, the school that is there because of the efforts of people like Father Tyson and all the team he had around him.
But we mixed around a lot, and I think we were feeling pretty positive about things. It was a happy school, let me tell you.
I learnt a lot there. It was one of those things which I felt always under Father Doneley. He taught me how to learn. I was pretty good at memorising things. I think I learnt so much more in the context of understanding what it was I was doing or what it was that I was trying to be good at, whether it was a particular subject in class or something like setting a field in cricket.
Well, I was happy with the staff because there was a very good MSc staff there. Some wonderful MSCs were there, in fact, on the staff, and I was happy to have them there. Father Frank Fletcher, Father John Bell, Father Bill McCormack, and Brother Dave Merrick, and some other brothers like that. So there was a wonderful MSc staff there.
Round the city you run into people from all sorts of backgrounds and places, and I became friendly with three brothers who came from Broken Hill, and they were Gordon, Tony and Doug Salia, and their father sent them to Downlands, and Father Doneley was there in their time as a teacher, and the amount of respect that they had for him was incredible. And when I mentioned them to him, and I was hoping I could get them to come out and see him, he said, Tony Salia, he said, was the top student of Catholic schools when he did the junior certificate in Brisbane, in Queensland. So what a memory. And I think in that year that Tony Salia was at school doing the HSC or senior, Mike Ahern was a student, and he went on to become the Premier of Queensland after Joe Bajelke-Peterson was deposed. Subsequently, in New South Wales, a contemporary of mine, John Fay, a great old boy of the school, wonderful student, you know, very much part of the makeup of the school. Went into politics, and he became the Premier of the state. And then in more recent times, one of Father Tyson's students from up in Darwin, of all places, has now become Premier of New South Wales, and that's Barry O'Farrell. So that's a pretty good record.
One of the memories I have in talking with Father Doneley over the years, over recent years, and I must say that Anne and I often visit Father Doneley at Kensington and enjoy those visits, enjoy seeing him, and enjoy seeing him still in reasonably good health for his 91 years at the moment. One of the things that I remember in those visits, we had a lunch here at Kensington, and we had Father Jerry Kelly, Father Fred Ross, Father Bob Rippon, all alive at the time. They were at the lunch, Father Doneley, and a number of past students, 2 or 3 of us. And we got talking about how we, the students, enjoyed being at the college at the time that Father Doneley was the rector. And I can remember Father Fred Ross piping up and saying, well, so did we. He said that the priests and the brothers at the time, in 60 and 61, looked upon it as a very, very enjoyable time. And I thought that was a reflection, a very positive reflection on Tyson Doneley then, to hear both his students and his confreres saying the same thing, you know, about him.
My memories of the college also go to the additional activities that I became involved in. Under Father Fletcher's guidance, I was invited to join the Young Catholic Students Movement. That was an organisation within the college that focused on not just our faith and what we could do to improve that, but also how we could give and do things for others. For example, part of our giving was to attend the Harvest and Retirement Village across the road to the college on a Saturday morning and chop firewood. In those days there were about 2 cottages there and only about 2 couples, and 1 in each. But nevertheless we'd do sufficient timber cutting for their week's activities to keep warm, etc. And that was part of the Young Catholic Student Movement.
There was just a positive mood about the place. You know, one of the positives was, I think Father Prentice might have been the person who started this, was we endeavoured to build a 9-hole golf course, you know, and so there was that feeling about the school that, you know, nothing was too hard for us, and I can't remember much about the golf, but I remember spending a lot of time on the golf, trying to build the golf course.
One thing that strikes in my mind, though, often when I pull off the Mossvale Road and drive up the driveway, I look to the right as soon as I come in, and I cannot still believe that we planted those pines on the right. And the damn things are about 60 or 70 foot high now. But that was one of Father Prentice's jobs. And every Saturday morning you jumped on the bomb and away you went and did the work.
And so when I first arrived at Chevalier, I couldn't believe the freedom that I had at Bosco House, where we were all boarders. And so we settled in, and we were a bit hard to control at the time, with pillow fights and chasing one another around over beds and all that. And so we had a chap called Father Ross, who was the boss of Bosco House. And he was I think, pretend strict disciplinarian. And he used to pretend to be strict, but I think he used to give us quite a bit of leeway. And they were happy days at Bosco House, even though Father Ross used to growl a bit.
There were many things you did get involved in at Chevalier. There'd be sport, there'd be YCS, there'd be academic things, there'd be debating. But one of the other extracurricular activities was cadets. And I quite enjoyed that experience. One of the enjoyable things was that you were supplied with a greatcoat and you needed a greatcoat at Bowral. The recollection that I had a sheet, I had my own rug doubled, I had a rug that they'd provided at the college doubled, and I had a greatcoat on top of that, and you were still cold. But the cadets of the day, probably back in the years of 60 and 61, were probably at their peak. And on that basis, there were, to my memory, about 120 students in the cadets. That was about 5 or 6 platoons. It was, we went away to camps once a year. I can recollect at Singleton, we won the award for the best school at the camp in that particular year. So it was run exceptionally well by Father Tony Prentice. He put his heart and soul into that and built it up over the years from a fairly low level to that peak. So it was a strong part of the college at the time.
I was one of the worst cadets the college has ever had, I think. Les Atkins and myself, who loved our sport, we both repeated the leaving. And in our final year, we managed to get permission not to be in cadets. And so we spent the cadets' time rolling the pitch or doing some work around the ovals. But cadets at Chevalier, we were both in cadets at Chevalier for quite some time. And I must say, Father Prentice did a fantastic job in running the cadets. He was a really enthusiastic guy. He loved the discipline and the marching and all of that. And the enthusiasm that he had, I think, spread through the whole cadet movement. It's just that some kids like it and some kids don't. But I think, by and large, I think most kids liked it. And the cadet brigade, for want of a better word, was pretty good and a good thing for the school. I thought that there was a good, strong emphasis on our faith at Chevalier. One of the things I remember was Father Doneley, most evenings, used to take a group in the chapel. I think everybody went to the chapel, but I don't think they all fitted in at the one time. But I can remember on many, many occasions, Father Doneley would say the rosary with us of an evening, probably after dinner and before study. And he used to walk up and down the aisle in the chapel. It was a beautiful chapel, and conduct the rosary. And it was quite a moving and religious and uplifting 15 minutes or 30 minutes. That he remembered all the boys that he'd ever taught. He said some of them have made great successes of their lives, others haven't quite, but they've still got a way to go and they'll be right. But he said every day that he prayed for everyone that he ever taught. And I truly believe that that is the man. He's ever thoughtful and caring for people that were under his charge.
What I saw particularly in those last 3 years under Father Doneley was the development of my own self-confidence. I think he taught me in those 5 years that I was there, but particularly under his stewardship, that education itself is about the partnership between the student, the teacher, and the parent. And I can say my father was a very shy and reticent man and would never particularly ask a question. I remember Father Doneley making an effort to talk to my dad and to tell him about the goods and the bads of his son, not just what I might have been doing right, but where I could improve. And he was inclusive. And I can say that was a lesson I took with me through later life, particularly when I had responsibilities in government.
I'd say the thing that what it produces is a genuineness and integrity of life as well. And the products of our school were like that, have been like that. Not always, but the best ones have an integrity and genuineness that is admirable.
He was very astute in the manner in which he could judge the character of his students, and if I can say, character building was one of his great traits. If I developed a character, and I hope to God I did as life went on, there's little doubt that he had the ingredients in what a proper character should contain. and those ingredients were passed on to us, including our faith. That was terribly important, terribly focal to all that is in character building. And I've got to say, thank God, in my case again, it stayed with me throughout life.
The motto at Chevalier is Fortes in Fide, and we would hope that the successful scholarship person would have that. I'm torn between saying that also that they would have wonderful skills in a particular subject or a particular sport or something like that, or whether they should be all-rounders. But perhaps that they have excellence in one area and capability in most areas. I think that's the sort of thing we might look for, that somebody who in the future has got the possible ability to go all the way in one particular discipline.
Well, I would hope it would be given to those who are good at study, made study a primary end in their life, and their general work with others, the community in general, as well as enjoy their sport. If they do those things and do them well, that they go a long way. I would hope that those who have the scholarship turn out, find people who make their contribution to Australia and to the life of the community in general.
When I reflect on the Tyson Doneley scholarship, it seems to me, without trying to grasp for too many words, I just turn back to Tyson Doneley himself. And I say to myself, the sort of people that you'd be looking for should reflect those sorts of principles and pluses that we all saw in Tyson Doneley. This humble man, this courteous man, this unassuming man, but this influential man. And when you coupled all those things together, as I said, at one point in time, you had this quiet leader. And he was the sort of person that all respected. Now, if the scholarship can start coming up with people like that, I'd be very pleased.